Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of Strategic Planning and Leadership. Before we get into this week's lecture, I just wanted to say a couple of things about our discussion forums from week 3. First of all, thank you for your participation. I always really enjoy reading the conversations following what you're all talking about and how you're building on each other's ideas. And I know my own perspectives are enhanced by doing that, so I hope you're experiencing that same thing. I did have a question that someone asked that I realized I had not provided some clear instructions on. And the question was, is there sort of an expected deadline by which each of you should make your first post in the forum? What I would like to see is that everyone makes at least one post by Wednesday of the week. And so that's important because then that sort of provides the foundation for the rest of the discussion, gives some ideas for others to react to. So as we move forward, try to remember that. Try to get your first posts in by Wednesday, end of the day on Wednesday of the week, and then again continue to come back and engage in conversation. So as we move into week 4, we've got 2 chapters from the Rummelt book, chapters 4 and 5. And then I also included a supplemental reading in Moodle that's called Strategic Planning in the Public Sector. This reading provides some nice history of strategic planning, and then it also provides sort of an outline of a variety of different strategic planning processes that are traditionally used not only in public sector but in all organizations. And so I'm going to talk about one of those at the end of this lecture, but please read that, and then that's something that we can engage in a little bit more in the next discussion forum. And then you do have your first written assignment coming up at the end of this week. It would be due on by the end of the day on Sunday, and that is your design brief. So take a look at the syllabus. Let me know if you have any questions. But basically what you're doing is letting me know what the organization is that you will be working with, and then sort of your approach to how you plan to engage with the organization, and do the 3 parts of that: the diagnosis, the guiding policy, and the coherent actions. So again, let me know if you have questions about that. But that is due on Sunday by before midnight. So just a couple things about the 2 chapters in the Rummelt book. So chapter 4 is titled "Why So Much Bad Strategy." So he talks about basically three reasons that we have so much bad strategy in most organizations. One is that we tend to avoid the pain of making hard choices. Another one is that we like to follow simple templates, sort of fill in the blanks. And then the third source of bad strategy is the belief that all you need is a positive attitude. I'm not going to address that last one, but I did want to say a couple of things about the first 2. So really one of the most obvious things about good strategy is that it's not only deciding what you're going to do in an organization, but it's deciding what you're not going to do. That's about making hard choices. And a lot of you got into that discussion in the forums last week and sort of recognized that already. So one of the kind of red flags that Rummelt talks about is that if you develop a strategy and there's sort of universal buy-in within the organization for that, that might be an indication that you are sort of avoiding those hard choices. Typically good strategy, Rummelt says, it's going to be beneficial to some people in the organization, and it's going to be detrimental to others in the organization. And so you're going to get pushback, and that's one of the real challenges of leadership in an organization that is doing good strategy, is that once you start engaging in that, you will get some resistance. I certainly experienced this. I know working with the university's strategic plan a couple of years back, we did everything we could to try to engage all of the stakeholders along the way. We felt like we were doing a pretty good job. We got done. What I think we produced really was more of the guiding policy as opposed to the full sort of coherent set of actions. But we got done with this process, and we shared it out, and we were, I think, a little bit surprised at how much resistance there was to it. And again, the resistance wasn't so much to sort of the content of the plan, but it was resistance to really the process that we used and the fact that we sort of bypassed traditional power structures and in particular faculty governance, who felt like we overstepped our bounds, that we were making some strategic observations and decisions that really were in their realm. And so we really did experience feedback or get some challenge back to the plan and the process. And, that's something you learn from. And so avoidance of pain of choice is really an issue. One of the things that happened this week is that I thought was really interesting is as I was thinking about this material in this lecture, I got a message from a colleague in our provost's office sharing an article from EAB. EAB is a consulting firm that the university works with fairly extensively. And so they had published this top 10 issues in academic affairs across all universities in the United States. And so I'm sort of a sucker for top 10 lists. And so I was reading through it, and I got to number 7, and this was number 7 on this list. From, quote, all things to all people's strategies, strategic plans to nimble prioritization. And so I was struck by the fact that basically an entire industry, like, all of higher education was sort of making this admission that all of the strategic planning processes that we've been engaged with over the years really did constitute bad strategy, as Rummel would say, and that we needed to change that. I think changing it, going from this all things to all people to nimble prioritization, I think Rummel may sort of label that as a little bit of fluff. Rummel would like it to say from all things to all people to hard choices. But I think at least it is a step in the right direction, that they're recognizing that typical strategic planning processes and our approach to strategy is not what we need at this time in organizations like higher education. And then the other one that I wanted to address was the idea of template-driven strategy. And so I did a quick Google search of strategic planning templates, and one of the top hits was this really incredible advertisement, not just for a strategic plan template, but the world's #1 strategic plan template. And so if you read through some of these, the benefits of using this tool, it's pretty fantastic. It sounds like, no effort, no time, you've got, the perfect plan. One of the things that sort of jumped out at me as I was perusing the bullet list of all these benefits is this idea that there's zero learning curve to using this strategic plan template. And I think one of the things that Rummelt is trying to tell us is that, the real problem with using templates to guide our strategy is that we tend to bypass the really hard thinking and the learning, and that really the true value of strategic planning processes aren't necessarily the plans that emerge from that, but the thinking that happens and the learning that occurs within an organization. And so just thought this was really interesting. It's out there. Obviously, there's many more of these sorts of tools and services that allow organizations to sort of bypass the good strategy processes that we're trying to talk about in this class. So the templates, typically what Rummel will say, they include vision, mission, values, and then strategies. And what he would say is that what most templates consider strategies aren't really strategies, but instead are simply aspirational goals. And I think what Rummel is saying is that it's not necessarily that we would not have these things as part of our strategy, but really these are the supporting players of strategy. And that really they support the core of what we're talking about. And that core in Rummelt's mind is what he calls the kernel. So the kernel of good strategy. So it's the diagnosis, guiding policy, coherent actions. And as he said, these are the bare bones center of strategy, the hard nut and the core of the concept. And as I read these words, one of the books that I had read in the past that I highly recommend to you, it's a book called Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. Subtitle is Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die. And what made me think of this is that really the gist of this, we're talking about in this book ideas, which is what strategy is about, and about communicating ideas and getting people to remember that communication and act on that communication. And so a real key to what's in this Made to Stick book is what Rummelt is trying to tell us, is getting to the core. So there's actually 6 different sort of concepts that the Heaths talk about. Simple, that sticky messages are simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. And they, if you read down the vertically, you see that there's this nice mnemonic device that this is success. And so I wanted to just say a little bit about simple, because that really is what we're talking about when we talk about the core. And I think you often hear people say, we need to communicate simply, or we need to design things that are simple. But I don't know that everyone has a clear idea of what that means. Often when we talk about communicating simply, we are thinking, well, we're just dumbing it down so people can understand it. But what the Heaths are saying, what Rummelt is saying, is really the simple is getting to the core. It's prioritizing what's that one thing that we're really trying to get across, that one key idea. And then in the Made to Stick book, it is having that one idea and then communicating it in a very compact way. And so one of the nice examples that they use in Made to Stick is from Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign. I don't know if you are aware of who James Carville is, but he's a Louisiana guy, kind of a crazy Cajun guy, and he was Clinton's campaign strategist for that campaign. And one of the things that, one day in their war room, he wrote on the board, sort of some principles that should guide the campaign. And one of those was this saying, it's the economy, stupid. And you've probably heard this, even if you're not familiar with where the origins of it came from. But what he was really trying to say, this was really getting to that simple core strategy. He was trying to make sure that everybody on the campaign staff, including the candidate, Clinton, who was sort of notorious for being unfocused in his speeches and going off topic, that he wanted to make sure that, I think that's sort of the emphasis of the word stupid is, hey, if we're not focused on this one core issue, we're being stupid. And so that's sort of the example of, what it means to have a really simple message. One of the things that carries over also then to the diagnosis. What you're trying to do with the diagnosis in Rummelt's mind is simplify the complexity within the organization. And so what I'd really love to see in your projects is something as simple as, it's the economy, stupid. What's that one simple, core, compact phrase that captures the essence of what you're trying to do? So one of the things they talk about in the this Made to Stick book as well is one of the ways that you can do that, one of the ways you can create these really compact messages that carry a lot of meaning and are understood by people is through the use of analogies. And so I think Rummelt talks about that as well, that a lot of the kernel of good strategy is going to be based on analogies or metaphors or references to other strategies that people can say, oh yeah, I know about that strategy, so that makes sense. A couple of the examples that they use in the Made to Stick book are with Hollywood movie pitches. And so, these guys come into Hollywood producers and they have an idea for a movie, and they have just a very short amount of time to sort of get the concept across. And so, he uses the example of a couple of them, like, the pitching the movie Speed, it's like Die Hard on a bus, or pitching the movie Alien, it's like Jaws on a spaceship. And so very simple things that tie the concept we're trying to get across to ideas or concepts that the person we're communicating with already sort of understands and gets. And so that's one of the I think the art of communication from leadership position is how do you do that, not only be able to understand how to simplify the complexity, but then how to communicate it to others so that they get it and they're all on the same page. So we move into the next step is the guiding policy. And so the guiding policy is outlining the overall approach. It's basically the principles that you're going to follow in your strategy. And so I think there's a really nice example in the Rummelt book that I like, the woman who owned the neighborhood grocery store. So she's trying to develop the strategy for sustainability and growth in a very competitive market. And so through her diagnosis, she determines that her guiding policy is that she is going to really cater to working professionals who get off work and they come through, they don't have much time, and so they're stopping through at the store and looking for healthy meals that they can prepare quickly. And so that becomes her guiding policy. And then what naturally follows from a guiding policy, if you follow those principles that you set, is this set of consistent and coordinated actions. And so in the case of the grocery store, then once she had decided that the principles I'm following is that I'm going to cater to these working professionals, that indicated what kind of actions she would take in terms of how she would stock her shelves, what kind of food she would put on her shelves, what kind of hours she would be open, the fact that it would be a good idea to have additional cashiers on hand during lunch hours and right after 5 o'clock when the heavy traffic was coming through, parking, accommodating parking needs, those sorts of things. So I think that's a really simple illustration of how you put these three things together effectively. And then the last slide I wanted to talk about is related to the supplemental reading that I mentioned that I have in Moodle for you this week. And it is, this reading, as I mentioned, has some nice history of strategic planning. It has some approaches. One of them that I wanted you to particularly pay attention to is what's called the Harvard policy model of strategic planning. So this was developed at Harvard University almost a century ago. And the reason I thought it was good to share this is because most of the strategic planning processes that I've been involved in and that I have seen organizations engage in have really been some variation of this model. And I suspect the same is probably true with your experience. So the Harvard policy model here, this is what it includes: preparing for the planning by doing stakeholder analysis. Who are the people that you need to engage in the process? Creating, clarifying, or updating your mission, vision, values, and goals. And so we've already sort of talked about that. That tends to be sort of what a lot of people do as their entire strategy, but that is not obviously all that needs to be done. This model also includes some environmental scanning, environmental analysis, both internally and externally. And so typically the way organizations do that is they engage in a SWOT analysis. So that's looking at the organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are primarily aimed at your internal environment. Opportunities and threats are looking at what's out there in the external environment. There are some other things that can be involved in your environmental scan as well, trend analysis and those sorts of things. Another step of this is then obviously doing the hard work of analyzing the issues that are facing the organization, and then logically next step is identifying what some of the potential strategies are for dealing with those, and assessing which of those strategies are the most feasible, the best actions to take. Then actually developing and implementing the plan. There's then a process of ongoing evaluation, monitoring, updating, assessing progress, and then wrapping up this model as it makes sense, as you're assessing not only the success of your strategies, but also sort of the success of your planning process, so then you can modify it later. So there's some sense that this is sort of that template, but I think again, what Rummelt would say is that all of these processes are valuable in strategic planning, but don't let these processes just simply filling in the blanks of these things without deep thought and deep analysis and synthesis. That's where we get in trouble with that strategy by template. The most perfect example that I often have seen in any time I've been involved in a SWOT analysis is when people start talking about their internal strengths. They always say, well, the strength is our people, and sort of stop at that. And that doesn't tell you a whole lot. You probably do have some really strong people in your organization. You may also have some people who are not in the right roles and those sorts of things. And so go deep. This paper also has some other sort of process mechanisms for strategic planning, as well as some content-based strategic planning options. And so read through that, and we will have a little bit more discussion about it in our Week 5 discussion forums. So that's it for this week. Hope you're all having a good week, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks.